Good afternoon. I just want to thank everybody for participating in our Neumann University Sport Management Virtual Conference. Thank you to all of our attendees as well as our panelists, and then we have a few moderators from NUSM 460 here as well. So today's panel is Sponsorships, the New Norm. So here are our panelists today. We have a panel featuring J.W. Cannon, Mark Dakes, Jared Melzer, Patrick Quinn, and Jose Jimenez. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Hey guys, I'm J.W. Cannon, Senior Director of Sports Alliances with the American Cancer Society, one of the top nonprofits in the United States. My role is to oversee the strategy of all of our different sports partnerships that we have, including the NFL, the NHL, Coaches versus Cancer, et cetera. And while I am on the nonprofit side now, the majority of the work that I've done in my career has been spent on the for-profit side with sponsorships in places like UPS, ING, Home Depot, and Bank of America. And appreciate you guys having me here.
I guess I'll be the second one. My name is Mark Dakes. I'm the Director of Corporate Partnerships at Premier Partnerships. We represent the likes of everyone from Bayern Munich to Estadio Azteca, doing the naming rights behind that. We also represent the United Soccer League, and we're doing some really incredible things with the 2026 World Cup around the corner. So exciting times for us, and it's really great to be here. And thank you, Dr. J, and thank you everybody for having me.
Mark, you're a hard act to follow, but
and so, oh, Jared, stop.
Hope everyone's safe and healthy wherever you are today. Jared Melzer, I run partnerships here at TE Connectivity. We're a $14 billion B2B technology company, really focused on connectors and sensors. Prior to coming over to TE, I was at Farmers Insurance, running their sponsorships, mainly focused on NASCAR and golf. And then I started my career on the property side with Lance Armstrong's cycling teams back in the day.
Hey guys, Patrick Quinn with Director of Corporate Partnerships over with the Philadelphia Union. Relatively new there, started there in October. Prior to that was with rival New York Red Bulls for about 8 years. Also some time with New Jersey / Brooklyn Nets and a couple minor league baseball teams. Work on the new business side. Excited to be part of this panel, some great people speaking, and I was able to check in on some of the other sessions you guys had. Moderators have done a great job of asking some great questions and keeping the flow of the panel going. So excited to be a part of this one, and look forward to it.
Hi everybody, my name is Jose Jimenez. I'm a account manager at Genesco Sports Enterprises. I'm a Neumann University alum, so I'm really excited to be back on a panel. Working right now, I currently do some consulting and a little bit of mainly event activation side for Genesco Sports, but I've worked at agencies and other sports teams properties doing their sponsorship. So excited to be here and offer any value that I can.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for coming and joining us again today. As I said, all attendees have the option to ask questions during the chat room, so please do. We encourage that. For our first topic, do you guys just want to touch on the role sponsorships play in the sport industry and the importance of them?
So I'll just take it from the property standpoint. I worked on the property side of it for my whole career here, about 20 years. And when you boil it down, it basically comes down to, 3 pieces. It's the brand, it's the team, the property, and the fans. And really what sponsorship is taking that emotional fan engagement, the fan emotional behind supporting a team and the players, and being a conduit for that brand to get that same emotion from the fan. So it's being creative and finding ways to make that connection, however it's possible to do.
Yeah, and I would go along with that and say, sponsorships are key. Especially on our side, on the agency side, we like to deliver value to the fans, whether that be within in-sport assets, in-arena assets, or digital assets, or just event activation. So we think sponsorships kind of drive home the relationship, especially like, I don't know if you guys saw today, like the Bud Light, booing Roger Goodell for the Super Bowl, like stuff like that helps bring together the league, the teams, and then also, the brand, putting the brand at the forefront.
I think one key thing is really how do you, being on the brand side now, how do you enhance that fan experience, but while at the same time being able to drive your brand and business objectives? I sit, in a department with my colleagues who are not in sponsorship, and a lot of times we're having discussions around, hey, how are you helping the company really become more successful and effective and efficient, and sponsorship needs to pull its weight just as much as any of the other departments in the group.
Yeah, and you make a good point, Jared. I mean, sponsorships is really no different than any other part of the marketing mix, to be completely honest. They're all about trying to accomplish business objectives. Really, the only difference that we have on our side and the partnership side is cooler tools in the toolbox to play with for the most part, right? But at the end of the day, it's about helping drive the company's business, and it's really no different than any other marketing function.
We have a question come in from one of our attendees saying, when seeking new sponsorships for a particular venue or sport team, what are some of the qualities in a company that you look for that makes you pursue them?
You mean outside of money? I think, you look at, you try to, ideally you try to match up what the culture of your identity as a brand, as a property, and try to match that up with what the brand, stand for, from a culture standpoint. I think, there's some natural fits and then some fits that you have to get really creative for. I had a good conversation, meeting Mark yesterday. He there's a benefit of being kind of where he is. He gets a couple of different properties and pieces that he can try to plug in, on when you work for one team, sometimes it's not always a natural fit. So you got to take the resources you have and try to find how to piece that together. But, I think ultimately it's listening to the objectives and then finding, going back and forth to figure out how you're going to reach those objectives through the assets that you have at your disposal.
I totally agree with Patrick. From my standpoint, as Patrick alluded to earlier, you have in our case, we're an agency and we represent these global properties. And for us, for Bayern Munich, it could be a brand in America that wants to put a footprint in Germany. And what better way to do that with Bayern Munich than the team of Germany in a lot of ways. For Estadio Azteca, it's completely different. And so it's mixing and matching and doing your research, understanding what brand wants to put their footprint where and how, and getting in touch with the right person who fully understands what the opportunity is. So that's from a global perspective in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that there's not any two sponsorships that are the same. Each of them are very different. Working at an agency and having the ability to kind of plug and play into different fields definitely helps us. But it's definitely just listening to what the brand or even the team, what the team wants to accomplish, and then trying to deliver, value to them with the variety of options that you have.
Yeah, I'm on the begging side of the table now, so it's a little bit different than being on the buy side where I was for a long time. But I think the one thing that I always look for, and I've taken that to more the sales side, is does this property that's pitching me understand my business, or do they show at least the inkling and the ability to understand my business, and how are they going to take the assets that they're going to deliver to help meet my overall objectives? And the first time around, they may not get it right, but you can tell the people who've done their research up front and who have really made an effort to try and get an understanding of a sponsor's business before they make the pitch. And you could see the ones that don't. They typically come to you with a gold, silver, bronze package, which is kind of the old-fashioned way of doing sponsorships. So understand your prospect's business and really do your research in advance, and it will show.
Yeah, I think I spot on there. It's really easy to see who is the asset manager, right? In terms of, logo, signage, appearances versus the group that really comes with more of that solution partner mindset and really wants to understand your business and kind of customize those solutions accordingly, as opposed to kind of just going off an Excel spreadsheet.
We had another question come in from an attendee asking, for those who have worked sports jobs for non-sports companies, are employers looking for candidates with business or sports management backgrounds for these positions?
I don't think it matters, honestly. I mean, again, I go back to what I was talking about and the difference between the sponsorship or partnership department and the rest of the marketing department. They're all the same. I mean, if you look at things in terms of widgets, the principles of business and marketing don't change just because you're working in sports. Only the tools in the toolbox change. And so I think so long as you can show the ability to adapt to what you have to work with in order to complete the job and ultimately help accomplish company objectives, I don't think it matters that you have sports specific experience or not. I think they're looking for smart business people.
Yeah, completely agree. Can you think strategically? Can you leverage the data? Can you be creative in terms of activation and solutions? I was on the insurance side, didn't know anything about, insurance. I was working in NASCAR, never went to a NASCAR race before I actually went over to Farmers Insurance. And it's just a matter of really becoming ingrained in the business and understanding the customer, understanding how the business operates, and, working together to present solutions that hit those objectives.
Agree with both. I would also say it's also your network as well. Jared and I were talking about this the other day of, wow, this guy has an incredible network. We know we have so many mutual friends, and both of us have been doing this for 10 plus years. And it's the ability to use your contacts and use your network and think on the fly and think differently. I think you can do anything you would want, honestly, whether it's sports or whether it's non-sports.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm the most recently graduated person on this panel, and I can say that the experience that I had in the Neumann program, but just in the sports management, have been great. But really, what came out of that is the network and the contacts, and that's really how I've gotten to where I'm at in my career, is just based on the contacts. But I mean, I think Jared mentioned it. Like, my former boss had a master's in history, and he was leading sponsorships at IMG. It had nothing to do with sports, but it's just the way you get there. If you can think on your feet, if you can think creatively, then you'll have a shot.
I think one other thing to add is, there's no job that's beneath you, right? Like, 10, 15 years, 20, 30, however many years, I'll still be picking up a box if we're doing a hospitality program or an activation and moving it from, one side to the other. And that's just been a mindset that I've carried throughout my career is, hey, how do I become a team player? Certainly you want to continue to climb up the ladder and be more and more strategic and take on more responsibilities, but never really forgetting that where you came from and the ability to really, be part of that team and make things happen.
I've always viewed it as it's my current job, but I'm also an intern. I'm also willing to do whatever an intern would do. So whether exactly what Jared said, whether it's moving a box, whether it's helping, saying hello to a new intern that comes in, Patrick knows this at the Philadelphia Union. We have interns coming in all the time. And sometimes just going up to a new intern and just kind of talking to them for 5-10 minutes is, it just, you see this trajectory just go way up from their just actual feeling of places, knowing that they're not alone. So I've always taken that mindset to everything I do, is an intern mindset.
So we're going to follow up with another question. There's a movement to a business back model in sponsorship that some properties are on board with and some are not. What is your personal philosophy on approaching sponsorship based on obtaining business back?
As somebody who faced that every day when I was at UPS, I think it's dangerous because I think it should be a natural evolution of business, honestly, to have business back. I think if you approach it with hey, we'll ship with you if you buy with us, it's very dangerous, because at some point, once you establish those business grounds, at some point they can go sour as well. And I think it's important to establish a sponsorship first and foremost, at least from the sponsor standpoint, as a marketing platform, not as a plan to get business back. Because as somebody who's been through it many times, it can get very sour in particular cases where you're not getting the amount of business back or something happens from a customer service perspective. I think first and foremost, brands need to look at it as a marketing platform first and foremost.
Yeah, I would 100% agree and echo everything. Business back is always going to have opportunity to be a piece of it, but when it becomes the whole partnership, it's really less of a marketing partnership than it is just kind of money exchanging hands in different ways, right? And I think if the brand sees the value of the marketing partnership, and they're getting business back, and the help in the sales side, like that's I think one thing. But when it becomes the whole partnership, I think there's a lot of room for failure in that capacity.
Thanks, guys. We'll move on to our next question. So this next question is regarding the current uncertain times. So how are you handling your sponsors with their current contracts? Are you extending them further this year or refunds?
So, from our standpoint, right now we're, still in the land of unknowns in a lot of different scenarios. And really at this point, we're just planning for as many scenarios as possible and being ahead of the curve in terms of, are there games you play with no fans? Are there going to be no games played? Are there going to be abbreviated season? Are they going to play at a neutral location? So, I think what, the goal is we don't anticipate trying to giving back money on any sponsorships, but we are also trying to figure out how they can get the value back. And that's where, a lot of creativity, a lot of, building out new assets. I think during this time, we've learned from a social digital sense that there's more that we can do and, and figure out ways that we can, change what maybe a partnership looks like. Obviously businesses are changing. So what their objectives were 6 weeks ago are different than they are today. So obviously being cognizant of that and being sensitive to that, but also recognizing that, at some point we're going to get through this, and, we hope that the long-standing partnerships that we formed, we can continue on with.
Agree with Patrick. I'll also say, and I think I speak for the group, for years we looked at force majeure and we're like, okay, let's just skip over it. Who cares about that part? And now it's like part of our everyday lives. I feel like it's insane that we're even talking about this. But I mean, for me, our clients are so different. So Bayern Munich, for example, the Bundesliga is talking about opening up the second week in May with no fans. And meanwhile, the crisis is just kind of hitting the up point in Mexico in a lot of ways. So Estadio Azteca, there may not be Liga MX games there for 6 months, 7 months. So it's knowing which client needs what, when. For Bayern Munich, I think they've done an incredible job with engaging their partners, whether it's sending out coloring books with Benny on it in Twitter, whether it's doing training sessions and engaging their fans on social media, tying sponsors to things. They've done a great job because they've kind of been ahead of it. So at the same time, I agree with Patrick too. It's a weird area, but those partners that are there for the long haul, they'll be loyal to you. And if you treat them well in your first year or two of the actual partnership, they'll treat you well, essentially, and they'll stick with you.
Yeah, this less than ideal time, obviously, for numerous reasons. But, I'm pretty excited to see, who's going to really rise up to the challenge and kind of adapt to the opportunity, adapt to this kind of new norm in the current state right now, but also kind of in the future state. And I think it's really going to test a number of relationships on both sides and really see who comes together and figures out solutions beyond, the logo, whether that be the logo in stadium and arena, or on a jersey, and start really coming up with some exciting activations that, continue to enhance the fan experience and at the same time also drive those brand and business objectives.
Yeah, and there's contracts in play, of course, and this is where the good lawyers really make their money. And I kind of laugh when you told the story about everybody now recognizing force majeure. I think some of the longest conversations I had with our legal team over contracts were never over the amount of season tickets in a contract. They were always over, or the size of our advertisement. It was always over things like force majeure and insurance, et cetera, worst case scenario kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, sponsorships, I think it's loosely been replaced by the word partnerships. I think the organizations that look at the contract as a sponsorship are going to hold you to whatever the contract says. Force majeure triggers X, which means I have to deliver Y. Your good partners are going to live beyond just those four corners of the contract. They're going to work with you to adjust your inventory based on what the changing objectives you may have or what's going on in the world. And that's really what a true partnership is those of you who are willing to work together to mutually achieve one another's goals. And I think that's where you're going to see true partners shine through in a pandemic that's just like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and some of the stuff we're being tasked with now is being creative and finding solutions that again, I'll say provide value for the brand or the fan. So whether that's a digital activation, whether that's the happy hours that everybody seemed to be doing, or whether that's just, preparing for what's going to happen when fans are back in stadium. So just being able to provide value for brands, clients, is just kind of where we're at right now.
Kind of shifting away from the coronavirus talk, we had a question come in. What is the best way to evaluate a potential sponsor's ROI, and how do you make sure you reach that?
Well, I think it's having an understanding of what their objectives are and really honing in on that. So, for example, if you're researching a company to come into the sponsor fold, and one good way to kind of understand what's going on in their business is to read their quarterly earnings report, and understand the direction that their business is going, and really seize on product lines that are being launched or business units that are really in focus or something along those lines, and trying to figure out a way to sort of form fit those assets that you have to match those objectives. But I think largely it's going to come through, you just sitting down and researching what that company's all about, what they stand for, what they're trying to accomplish. And that will ultimately lend itself to improving that sponsor's ROI over time.
Yeah, I think it's also, to your point, ROI, everyone wants to get to a final number sometimes. It's really kind of that ROO, return on the objectives. So, for example, we sponsored the Andretti Formula E team. We had our products actually in the car, Formula E being electric car racing. So a big part of the objective was actually an R&D play, right? Which maybe some people wouldn't normally think from, right off the bat. That's more of an objective as opposed to maybe a dollar value coming out at the end of the day, but really kind of working closely with Andretti and their team from an engineering perspective. So just being able to understand all the different levers you can pull from a sponsorship beyond just kind of, sales or growth of customers, whether that be employee engagement, whether that be, recruiting talent, whether that be, R&D, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, and I would just also say that, there's obviously more, brands are obviously a lot smarter than they were, 20 years ago, where, you could sell a sign and say, this is how many eyeballs are going to be on there. And, there's how many people in a stadium, there's how many people saw, right? So now there's more technology, there's more expectations on that return, whether it's ROI, ROO. But you have also some more resources out there that you can, bring in. Some major contracts will use, whether it's Nielsen or GumGum or MVP Index, and they'll help you, give you put legitimate valuations behind assets and partnerships, which helps to justify the investment as well.
Thank you, guys. We have another question regarding the current state. So if this current state is a way to show digitally will be the new form of business. Is it more difficult now to gain sponsorships while a pandemic or situation like this is going on?
Yes. Actually, I don't know how to sugarcoat that question. Yeah, it's definitely challenging. You know, I think a lot of brands are you know, just like as team properties. I think everybody is still a lot of uncertainties. You know, for us, you know, I always look at it as you control what you can control, right? And you can control the planning, the strategizing, and it goes back to something I learned 10 years ago when it's not an apples to apples scenario, but the whole idea of controlling what you can control is, you know, I worked with the Nets when we were 12-70, one of the worst teams in NBA history. And, you know, I could never control what was on the court, but I can control fan experience. I can control, you know, the way that I interacted at a relationship level. And I've always thought about that, regardless of what challenge came in through, you know, through working in sports. There's certain things I can control, and as long as I just got to continue to focus on those things, and everything else is, you know, the government is going to determine when people can go back to play and games can be played, and whether fans can be there, and then, you know, leagues will have their own restrictions. So, you know, it's taking a look at what you control, and that's the engagement right now on a social digital level. You know, we're looking at, I think, you know, esports is something that has been evolving, you know, throughout all, I think, professional leagues, and obviously on its own. But, you know, with us, we have, you know, EMLS, and we've done some, you know, fan tournaments through FIFA. The USL does the E-Cup with Rocket League, and, you know, just cool ways to kind of bring esports to the forefront from a team level that, you know, maybe we didn't put as much, we always had a focus on, but now it's, you know, it's right front and center. And a shameless plug, we have our on ESPN3 tonight at 7 o'clock. We are hosting, or we will be in the round of 8 for the E-Cup on Rocket League. So check that out.
I'll kind of touch on what you said, Patrick, and the question Marissa brought up. Do you guys see a growth, or I guess an increase in maybe digital sponsorship with this going on and kind of the growing digital age that's coming about?
I 100% do, Corey. I think now more than ever, and I was saying this to Jared yesterday, is now we're going to use the entire team. So for whether it's the Philadelphia Union's training staff or nutrition staff, or it's Bayern Munich's, we're going to use everything and make these people real and bring these people to social media, because these people right now, these fans are cooped up in their houses and they're trying to find different ways to work out. So I think it's an unbelievable opportunity from a social and digital perspective for these teams to go super in depth on their staffs. And I just remember being at the Philadelphia Union, our strength and conditioning guys were awesome. And Patrick can add into this too. They had these incredible personalities, and so did, you know, everyone on the nutrition staff as well. And I would love to hear from them. People would love to hear from them. And which ways to eat during a pandemic, what's good, what's bad, how do you work out in your bedroom, how do you work out in your family room. People want to hear that stuff, and now I think it's a really interesting way to engage people.
And I also say, you're opening up more access now, right? We're opening up ways that we probably didn't open access before on a, you know, from a social digital level, right? Whether it's players, and, you know, I think teams and sports are really pushing the envelope on that. You know, I think it's fun to see that, you know, the way that players and teams are being more active, almost because they have to, right? Because it's the only way that we can't be, you know, in a physical interaction, have a, you know, game or whatever it is. So I think it's fun to see from that standpoint how much it's growing, and how, like I said, the access to players and things like that, and how more personable they almost are, even, you know, through, you know, even if it is from their living room.
Yeah, I think it was always skewing that way. I just think this kind of just burst it tenfold. You know, I always saw, especially the past couple of years, a lot of clients were asking for more digital and more social assets. But I definitely think now it's super important, especially during this time to give people access that they normally wouldn't have, whether that's the team trainer, whether it's the mascot at his house, whatever the situation is. But it's definitely, tasking the creative team to come up with ways to give more access, because that's what people want.
We're going to switch it up a little bit and talk about how sponsors are connected to the community around them and who they represent.
Yeah, I can take this one. One of the really great partnerships that we had at Premier was when we were doing the naming rights for Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, and JW, I'm sure, knows all about that. But one of the really great parts about that was that Mercedes was moving their entire staff from northern New Jersey all the way to Atlanta. And that was really their way of putting their flagpole in Atlanta and just saying, this is our headquarters now. This is the Premier Stadium, and we're going to be a part of the Atlanta community. I think those kind of partnerships really speak volumes. And then after that, you had the outpouring of college football games in Atlanta. It's kind of become the football central in a lot of ways, whether it's for the SEC, whether it's for the ACC. You have just so many options there. So I think that was kind of the beginning almost of a very, very good college football market, and making it even better in my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the colleagues that I'm very close with in any company that I go to are always the folks on the CSR side, and really trying to understand how they're looking at CSR as an opportunity for the company, certainly giving back to the community and the greater good of society, and then figuring out a way how the sponsorships and the partnerships that we have kind of come on top of that and really amplify that. And we've seen a lot of really great success. Worked on a program with Farmers Insurance around Thank a Million Teachers, similar to insurance agents. Teachers kind of help protect the future and people's dreams. So we kind of did a whole NASCAR kind of month in May, Teacher Appreciation Month. And what we saw was when we layered on our NASCAR partnership, consideration increase was higher than without it. Awareness of the initiative was higher. Likelihood to purchase, similar to consideration, was higher. So, really getting close to, I think, the CSR folks in the organization and understanding what their initiatives are and their objectives and how that really kind of comes together is really important.
Yeah, I think what this pandemic has sort of taught us is the importance of community, right? And just to be supportive of one another and not necessarily just to sell stuff. And so I think you're naturally seeing a lot of sponsors shifting from this more self-serving kind of salesy sort of message to one of more community support, and whether that's supporting fans directly, whether that's supporting nonprofit organizations. And frankly, I mean, selfishly speaking, being a part of a nonprofit organization, I think it's a welcome change to begin with, because I think it's been a long time coming.
And I think just to add on that, right, the ones that are doing it really well kind of have this kind of mission, right, where it's not just property and brands, but then all of a sudden they're getting kind of the fan and the communities to also participate and really amplify it in this greater mission.
Right. I mean, fans are communities, right? Yep. And they have these sort of established rules of engagement, and they've been willing to show love and support for sponsors that embrace that community. But you sort of have to follow the rules of that community, and that means kind of being supportive. That means not coming in and beating people over the head with a sales message. They want to be sold to, but they're not willing to be sold to. And but I think there are ways that you can come in as a sponsor and really get embraced by that, by embracing the aspect of community.
Yeah, and I saw this. I read this crazy stat today that said, 356% of consumers are more likely to interact with brands that are doing, positive things during COVID rather than selling them stuff. So that's definitely, I read that today in one of the articles from the morning consult. But it's just one of the crazy things about it all is just if you can produce good content and help people in the community, sports like fans will rally to you, and it's kind of been shown across the board.
And I was kind of chiming too. I think obviously the community part has always been a big piece, and I think brands have always wanted that part of it and that engagement. But I think, this obviously is going to bring it, to the forefront as being a major priority based on just all the branding messaging that's going out there now. And, I think one thing we did recently did the naming rights with Subaru, and all the naming rights, putting the name on the building was the big piece. I would say the core was really the community focus and around just Subaru loves and Subaru loves promise that they've done. So it was, when you saw in our press releases, it was talking about, putting a community garden on our campus next to the stadium so that, there was, having, fresh produce for the local community, through pet adoption. We're going to have dogs on site during games to promote that side of it. Childhood cancer awareness, they're part of it. So basically there are 5 major pieces. The core of their partnership was all based around community. So I think, obviously it was right before all this, but I think that's only going to be amplified now that, we're all, it's going to be a different world. And I think community is going to be a major piece of all partnerships going forward.
Yeah, I think going off that, Patrick, it's a little more personal to have a group like Subaru than some kind of bank that you can just throw the name on there. I think with Subaru, them actually coming out, doing some good quality activation really shows the connection to the community and also the fans. And I think, like you said, that's what people are looking for nowadays, opposed to just a name on a building.
Another question we have was how to plan and adjust to the new norm. Some predictions and projections for the future in sponsorship/partnerships.
Well, I think we're certainly in a new era of worst case scenario planning up and down sports. I mean, that's for sure. It's kind of weird to say that like one of the most traditional organizations in the All England Tennis Club was ahead of the curve with this insurance policy that they had for Wimbledon that paid out in the case of a pandemic recently. But here we are. And I think from a legal standpoint, you're going to see a lot more protections in contracts being sought after, or a lot more specifics when it comes to force majeure events. I think from a sponsor standpoint, you're going to really see a lot more worst case scenario planning from a crisis communication standpoint. Like, what do we do? How do we communicate when and if these kinds of things happen? We sort of took for granted how good we had it. But now that this pandemic's happened, we're darn well going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you're going to see a lot of adjustments that are made usher in a new era for things like venue safety, security, sanitation, that sponsors are all going to have to consider. But I do think where you're going to see a lot of these restrictions pop up, I think it's also going to bring about a lot of more opportunities, new sponsorship categories. I mean, how many people were thinking about how valuable their cleaning partner was, or their double cleaning partner is, whatever those new standards that are going to be set are. So how many people were thinking about the venue safety and security partner at this point? So I think it's going to open up a lot more categories and opportunities for companies to get involved that previously weren't involved.
Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time on the experiential marketing side, just planning for what exactly that looks like, whether that's whether that's AR related or that's no touch activations at stadiums. We spent a lot of time thinking about what are consumers going to want to do. Are they going to want to go back to games? When they go to the games, do they need to be given a mask? So we spent a lot of time researching, what the next step really looks like. And really, to be honest, no one really has a clear answer. It's just kind of coming up with a bunch of different scenarios to play out in case XYZ pops up.
Yeah, I think just with any challenge, there comes new opportunities, right? And it's kind of figuring out where those are, no matter what position you sit in at this point, and adapting to that. So I think there's this some point we'll pass through and things will be different, but there are also there's industries that are going to do better. There's the brands that are resilient and able to adapt the best are the ones that are going to be they're going to be even more aggressive. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes, but I think it's everything. At some point we'll back to normal, hopefully.
Yeah, it's going to be one of these, as I mentioned before, kind of this adapt to the opportunity, and I think just eyes wide open and kind of a test and learn, right, on both sides, on all sides. But just knowing that, fans love to be entertained, fans love the community aspect, fans love competition, those will continue, and I think it's, an unfortunate time, but also an exciting time to see what happens.
I think properties and brands are going to be a lot more lenient with each other after this. I think obviously you'll have a contract, but I think everyone will look at this thing totally differently. And I think people will be a lot more lenient. The property side will be a lot more lenient because what this whole thing was. So I think over the long term, what this is people will listen more than they ever did, in my mind. I think it's a blessing almost in disguise in a way, because I felt like in our industry sometimes it was a lot of logo slapping that was still left over, and I don't think that'll happen anymore, which I'm happy about, obviously. But I think those properties and those brands will listen to each other more now than ever.
Yeah, I think that's where the partnership aspect comes into. I think that's what JW touched on, opposed to just a sponsor, but being a partner, working together. And I agree with you. I think we'll see a change in how partners go about their business and stuff. Should be cool to see.
So another question: when working in partnerships, are you also hands-on with the activation side?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of full gamut. Small team here, so it'll be every day, which is exciting. Every day is different, but kind of looking at kind of the partnership strategy, the activation strategy, the actual implementation. Certainly working with some other partners, agency side, but it's an exciting industry. I love it. No day is the same, and I wouldn't trade it.
From the property representation side, that's one of the things I miss probably the most, is being able to see a partner fully activate year round. Now it's, because you're a property representation firm like Premier, you sell the property, you sell to the brand, give it to the property, but you're always checking in though on your brand contact. You're always seeing how they're doing, what's going on, like give me your unbiased opinion. So I kind of treat it as I'm sort of activating at the same time, but from a personal standpoint, I always want to know how they're doing, how their partnership's going. So that's my take, but I miss the activation side of it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because every property kind of handles it a little bit differently in terms of how you transition, or whether you do transition to an activation team. Being on the new business side, you fight so hard to get to a partnership, right? It sometimes takes years, and when you finally get to the end, it's we have a activation team that really kind of is the day to day and brings kind of the conversation to life, right? But having put all the time into it, you also want to be a part of that, that success, right? And kind of be a part of how the ideas came to fruition, and kind of see it. You want to make sure that it kind of follows the ideas that you had in your head, right? So it's interesting. I think for us, at the union, we have a great activation team. They're awesome. They deliver, from what I've seen in the short term I've been there, deliver on the way that the partnership was created. But it's different throughout different properties. So it can change anyway.
I think no matter what, it's important that whether it be separate departments or one department, that everyone's really synced up there, right? That when that handoff comes, if there is a handoff, that it's seamless and everyone knows what the conversations were previously and what the conversations look like going forward to ensure success.
Yep. Knowing when kind of bringing, kind of having that overlay where you're handing off, having them as part of that conversation as you get to that handoff.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've done it a couple of different, ways, a couple of different places I've been, but the most successful partnerships that I've had are where the handoff is seamless, but we both stay in touch and we both kind of are keeping that relationship with the client, because, you don't want to sign a deal and then not talk to them until they're up for renewal. You want to keep touching them in, keep having touch points and keep having that relationship. And if you have a really good relationship with your activation team, it makes the entire partnership even better.
Okay, our next question is, do you expect a decrease in companies' budgets for sponsorships and activations?
Well, the property guys hope not.
No,
I think,
not at all. Not at all affected.
They're going up.
Yeah,
Jared,
I think the reality is yes, right? And that's just across the board a lot of times in marketing, as opposed to kind of, we're just going to take money from sponsorships. I know there's a lot of discussions happening with many different brands around, where can we pull back, especially if you're a public company. Everyone's asking to kind of contribute back into the pot, as opposed to take, which just requires, one, open dialogue, and how can you become even more creative, even more scrappy, and, meeting those objectives.
The simple answer, if sports aren't happening, people aren't spending, right? So you can't activate something to a great degree without things actually happening. So naturally, you're going to see that, because there isn't anybody who hasn't been impacted by this pandemic. It's impacting almost every sector of our industry, either from a detriment to their overall business, or frankly an overload of their business. You're seeing like oil is as one, being an oversupply at this point, and healthcare being an oversupply at this point. So I think that there hasn't been a single industry that hasn't been impacted. And what happens with that, people tend to draw back and focus on the bread and butter of their business. For us as an example, there's not a lot of willingness to go spend on doing new and fancy events. Where we are spending our money is to make sure that we're keeping revenue coming in the door, or keeping dollars coming in the door from a fundraising standpoint. And that means propping up some of the events that we have had canceled as in-person events, but perhaps are moving to virtual. So you're seeing people sort of really rally around the priorities of the overall business. And that's going to be different for everybody. But I think naturally what happens in these times, when the economy is bad, or when we have one of these sorts of types of issues happening, these big happenings, is people tend to draw back on marketing first and foremost, which it is unfortunate, but it's a natural part of how business occurs, right? People don't want to be out there beating their chest about how great they are and what sales they have when people are suffering. And, that's sort of where we are.
Good news, we're all saving on travel.
Yep.
Sorry, Mark.
Sorry, 100% agree with JW. We're in the toy section of the store, and whether you like it or not, we're going to be the first ones. We're going to be the first ones cut. But I also think from a brand side, it's also an incredible time if they're successful, because they can come out of this and do things they never could before. So it kind of reminds me of 2008, 2009 with the mortgage crisis, where you're going to have these properties that have this incredible reach, and it's going to be an incredibly affordable buy for some of these brands. So from a brand side, it could be very, very good. I think from a property side, you just need to be strategic enough and actually have the understanding and wherewithal of what's going on. So I agree with JW wholeheartedly. But it's an interesting time regardless.
Yeah, so we have a question about the future with esports. With the current halt in live sports, and I know Patrick kind of just plugged their Rocket League tournament going on. How do you think sponsors are currently looking at the future of esports and kind of how that's going to be different than live sports with something going on like right now?
Yeah, I'll start with this one. I think it depends on the league or the sporting event. Personally, I think there's obviously some more viable leagues out there than others. And a lot of the brands that I'm working with or was working with were looking to dabble and kind of just see where the viewership was and if it made sense for the dollars that they were putting in. So I still think that's sort of the case right now. Although I do follow a little bit of esports, and I know that there's been a huge uptick during the pandemic. So I'd be interested to see what some of the bigger brands do.
I think the biggest.
Yeah.
You go.
Good. So I was going to say, I think to Jose's point, there has been a lot of, obviously the endemic brands have always been, that's direct sales efforts, and they've always been a part of it. I think, you see some of the major brands, to Jose's point, trying to dip their foot in the water. Everybody knows, there's the metrics are out there. Esports has blown up from, over the past 10 years, and it's from forecasting, it's going to be bigger than all major sports at some point. And I'm sure this is, speeding up the timeline a little bit, but I think there's also that, a lot of conversation on how the best way to integrate a partner organically into that. If you're an insurance company or an auto company, like where is that connection, right? So I think that's where, I think a lot of the challenge lies, but I think there's also a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges remains around education, right? It's just such a fragmented industry. When you look at games, consoles, broadcast partners, publishers, events, and I think everyone, there's a lot of conferences that are really just popping up that are really based on laying that foundation around the education, where of course, more of the traditional sports like NFL, most people don't really need that level of education from a brand side. So I see it continuing to grow as people get a little bit smarter. And to Patrick's point, how do you authentically integrate? I'm not so sure I've seen many brands do a really solid job there. Gillette, I think, has been one that rises to the top from what I've heard, but not many that stick out. Certainly a lot involved, but the authenticity and integration still remains a question mark in my opinion.
Yeah, esports is a little bit of an enigma for me. We often talk about bubbles bursting in sports, and this is going to be a watershed moment for esports. It's a very heavily invested in, but not heavily revenue driven sport yet. There's not a lot of revenue being derived by these teams and these leagues to a great degree that's made them significantly profitable. And what I think this pandemic has sort of underscored is the need to have solid business practices in place and have a plan to get to profitability. You're seeing the dry up in venture capital and private equity funding coming along with that. And esports is not going to be immune to that. So I think it's going to be a watershed moment for them to really take advantage of this time when they have the microscope firmly placed on them to really shore up how they're going to ultimately drive long-term revenue with sponsorships, with advertising and things like that, while people are actually buying it. Because I think coming out of this, the organizations that are more shored up from a financial standpoint are going to survive, right? But I think you're going to see at the end of this, there might actually be some esports that actually go away, whether that be teams or leagues, and that's going to be because they weren't able to turn this into a profitable model.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges I had when I was dealing with brands and esports was there wasn't the gums of the world, right? The sales forces or the Nielsen sports data to back up the spend. So that was some of the stuff that really stuck out to me when I worked I didn't work on it a ton, but when I did work on it, that was some of the stuff is how do we measure the ROI like we talked about earlier, you know?
Well, there's a fear of missing out, right? You know, it reminds me a lot of it. You talk about 2008 and 2009 being a moment for the industry where, you know, where different industries were born and different tactics were born. And one of those was social media and the advent of brands leveraging social media. Esports reminds me very much of where we were at that time. There was this mad rush of brands. There was this mad rush of people all getting involved and saying this social media is a thing and we need to get behind it. We need to support it. It was run mainly by insiders, you know, which esports is largely driven by the insiders who sort of kind of built the esports community. Whereas, you know, the insiders at that time with social media were interns, but it took some very smart business people to sort of come in and figure it out and figure out, more importantly, how to monetize it and make it a business thing and make it revenue producing. And you see where we are with social media now, you know, 10, 12 years later, and how brands are leveraging it. I mean, it's a very successful entity. I mean, it's built a whole new side of the advertising industry that we never would have imagined at that time. And so esports is kind of at that point. And I think this is a watershed moment for them to figure it out.